I'm sure that we all know that when you add a video transition, you can add it so it's centered on the edit, it starts after the edit, or it ends with the edit. But what's the difference? If you're just making a slideshow with still pictures, it doesn't matter at all, but it certainly does when video is involved. It's just hard to understand what's really happening. So I've created this little example where hopefully you can see what's happening. It's actually composed of 3 still images: a black background, a blue background, and an image with 2 circles which are on a transparent background. To simulate a video, I've added keyframes and transformed the image with the circles so that they grow and rotate with each frame. Since we know that they will move with each frame, this should help us understand exactly what's happening. If we look at the video, at the beginning, the circles are small and start on the left, and as we move along, they grow and end near the center. In the second part of the video, the circles again start small, but they're in the center, and they move to the right as they spin and grow. Now we're going to add a cross dissolve that ends with the cut or edit. First, I'm just going to add it to the layer with the circles on it, and I'll move the playhead back here, but instead of previewing, I'm going to use the arrow or cursor keys to go forward 1 frame at a time. And if I hold them down, it zips right along. I let go, and now I'll step 1 frame at a time. And as you see, once we've gone into the transition, the circles from the next video are starting to fade in, and the large circles are fading out. But notice that the small circles are not moving. That's because the transition is only acting with the first frame of the next video. And as we cross here, now we see the background layer under the other video, and we see nothing of the large circles from the first video. What we've just seen is a secret to understanding what's happening. During a transition that is before the edit, the transition is being applied to the video before the edit and just the first frame of the video after the transition. If the transition crosses a timeline, then the transition after the edit is applied to the last frame of the video before the edit and to the video after the edit as it continues to play. Now let's select the transition. We'll go up here to the inspector and we'll change the alignment to center. And let's look at what happens now. Move the playhead back, step forward. As we cross into it, same thing we saw before. The small circles are not moving, but they're fading in. The large circles are fading out. As soon as we cross the timeline, now the large circles stop moving, but keep fading out, and the small ones are moving. Now we'll change the alignment to start on the edit. We'll go back, same thing. We'll zip along, single step. We're seeing the large circles because they're the last frame of the previous video, but they're fading away, and the small circles are moving and becoming totally involved. Now let's try a star transition. We don't have to remove this transition. We can just go up to the inspector and change it. Find the star transition down here somewhere. There it is. And I'm going to center it on the edit. Move the playhead back, and we'll see what happens. Well, there's a star starting to appear, but it's very hard to tell because it's black on black. So let's add a star transition to the background layer as well. We'll put it in the middle. Now we see a star. So let's go back and look at it again. There it is. Notice the small circles are not moving. The star is coming over. And as soon as we cross, now we have the small circles moving. So, it's really very simple if you just remember one thing. As each frame passes under the playhead, the transition is between that frame and the first or last frame of the video on the other side of the edit. And if you're just creating a slideshow with still pictures, it doesn't matter where you put the transition, because every frame under the playhead is the same as all the other ones on that side of the edit. I've always centered transitions over the edit, but that's probably because it was my only choice in more basic editors. Now I've found that depending on what's happening in the video, a transition may look better before or after the edit. The one you choose depends on which clip you want to see moving during the transition. Here are a couple of drone clips, one with the drone flying over some boats that are moored, and then the second one after it turns and starts flying in toward the lobster dock. I'm going to try an oval transition, so I'll put the oval, and I'll put it before. And as you see, if we move the playhead over it, an oval is really a circle unless we change the oval ratio. So to do that, we need to select the transition. We need to get the little arrow pointing to it, left click, go up here, and here is the oval ratio. It defaults to 1, which is a circle. If you go negative, it becomes an oval in this direction. If you go positive, it's an oval like this. We'll set it to some random number. Now, I like to see the oval start over the dock. So I'm going to move the offset. Got to use a scrubby slider. Move it over here. We'll move the Y position up a bit. And now now let's move it a little bit to the right and see how that looks. We'll move this back and forth. That's about what I want. Okay, let's see how this looks. We'll single step it, and that's good, except it doesn't focus on the lobster dock for that long. Most of the transition is afterwards. So to solve that, we can use another adjustment called ease, and instead of none, we can change this to in. And now if we ease into it, you see this happens more slowly. Much more of the transition is taken up at the beginning. That will also work well if we make the transition longer. Let's change it to 3 seconds and go back to the beginning, and we'll single step again, and look how slowly the oval is increasing in size. The lesson to learn here is that every transition has lots of different options that you can set under the inspector. Explore them. Similar transitions will have similar options. If there's something you really love in the next clip, I recommend the heart transition, but like we did here, be sure to change the offset to focus the viewer's attention. The heart transition also has the ease into it option. One last thing, if you right-click on a transition, you can change its position relative to the edit without going to the inspector. But you can also create a preset, and you give the preset a name, and say OK. And once you do that, if you scroll down to the end of the transitions, you'll find it's added a user transition, and you can add as many as you like. You can use them then at any time. Now in this case, I would have recommended that before we saved it, we had set the offsets back to 0, because that's probably a better starting point for a preset. But otherwise, I think that's a good idea. While we're talking about transitions, here's one thing that confused me the first time I ran into it. You see here, I have a 9-minute clip, and after I finished editing, I want to add the transitions. So I go up here, I grab a dissolve, and I'm going to drop it right here. And nothing happened. You ask what's going on. Well, the answer is that the timeline is zoomed out enough that you can't see the transition at all. You have to zoom in and it'll start to appear. So let's go put the playhead right here between the transition, and we can zoom in with the plus symbol here. We can use a little slider to zoom in. There you see the transition starting to appear. I like to use the keyboard shortcuts. Control and plus zooms in. Control and minus will zoom out. And Shift Z zooms back so you can see the entire video on your timeline at once. But we won't do that right now. Anyway, once you have it there, if it's not in the right place, you can drag it over. Sometimes you'll get unlucky and you won't have any transition at all. But if you zoom in, you can put it exactly where you want it. So that's the way it works. And see, there's the blur coming in. Remember I said Shift Z? Get you back like that. One problem I have is remembering what the various transitions look like. To help me, I created two 1.5-minute videos with short samples of each one. They're broken into two groups. The top half of the transitions, which are the dissolve, iris, and motion transitions, and then the shape and wipe transitions. You can find these videos on my channel and links to them in the description below.